Okay, in this episode of Doc's Boost, it is finally part 3 of the troubleshoot, and it's the big reveal. I finally found out what the problem was, and you're gonna be amazed. I know I was. So what I did was I sat down and used some common sense because all of the technology just wasn't doing me any good, as you saw in parts 1 and 2. I did uncover a whole bushel basket full of stuff. So with all of that in mind, I sat down and made a list. It wasn't starting normally. It was kind of rolling to a start rather than blasting off to a start like it normally did, like it should do. Fuel consumption was off the wall. No power, no boost. Cruise control on, going uphill, it would slowly slow down, and finally cruise control would just let loose. The idle was so erratic, up and down, and sometimes stable, and then dropped to about 500 RPMs where the throttle became unresponsive, and then it would kick back in as if there was some kind of throttle body issue, but there wasn't. It sounded like it was backfiring and not hitting on all 8 all of the time. And the fact that I cannot relearn crankshaft position anymore. Any one of those symptoms didn't prove one thing or another, but collectively, when I made a list, common sense told me it had to be out of time. And the best way to figure out all of that was to disassemble, see what I can find out. And this journey is getting that front cover off to look at the timing. I'm going to take off the front cover because I don't want to have to be leaning over this and constantly protecting it in some way. So I'm taking off the front cover, taking this off for sure, and then I'm going to put some protective coating that you've seen before on some of my videos on the fenders, so when I lean over that, I'll be able to protect all the paint. And really, what I'm expecting to find when I do that is something wrong with the chain tensioner. Something's going to be loose, something's going to be broken, or something's going to be missing. So, so we're all going to be surprised together, but I'm pretty sure I'm on the right track to fixing the performance issue. So let's start with the battery. I really like these battery cable ends that I bought so I can add as much accessories as I want. And they tighten up really well. They're billet constructed. They're rather expensive. They're like 60 bucks a pair, but they're well worth it. That bolt, that, and that. So there's 3 bolts that have to come out. So I'm going to take those out. Those, I believe, are 8s. And then that tray can come out. So now that we got the battery tray out of the way and we got a clear shot to get the valve cover off, let's go ahead and clear all of this stuff out so we can take the valve cover off on this side. And that'll give us some degree of progress, right? Take the canister out of the way. We got to take my bypass valve and tube out of there, and it's not going to be like yours, so I'm not going to show you the detail. But I definitely have to get it out of the way because it is attached to the valve cover and the supercharger. Take a good look at where the bolts are. So we've got a bolt with a stud. Well, that's not a bolt. That's just a stud in the valve cover itself. So let's see. We got a bolt. We got a stud here and we got a stud there. So stud at the corners, and that's the only place. Regular bolt there. Regular bolt I don't even feel any bolts back here. But we'll take a look, and once we get this out of the way, I don't know if there's one in the corner there or not. So we'll have to take a look once we get there. Well, you've seen me take the coil covers and spark plugs out already, so they're gone. And if you need to see how that's done, go check out part 1. Oh, there is one more right there. Oh man, I am so out of it. Now it should come out. So everything here, I mean, this is tight. This looks tight. Nothing's broken or obvious. I can't see deep down in there or anything like that. There is a timing mark right here. So we'll be able to line these up once we get the front cover off and get the valve cover off on the other side. You've seen me take this off many times before, so I'm just going to whip through it. The big question is this part, which is not detachable, ends right here. Valve cover comes right through here, so hopefully I got enough room to get it off of there without removing the supercharger. Let's get this thing done. Disconnect the hoses. As we'll disconnect the electrical connections for the throttle body, because the throttle body definitely has to come off too. This one and this one. Get this out of there. There we go. Get these 2 bolts out. So this piece has got to come off next. Got to get this hose out of the way, and then we'll take the bolts out, and that should come right off. So I need a new hose for that. That out of the way. Alright, so now we can get that bolt out. Son of a bitch. Alright, so now we got this, and the problem we got here is that that lock bolt to hold that in place is making all of it turn. Damn. Okay, what's back there is a noise suppressor attached to one of the valve cover bolts with a stud on it, and every time I try to take that lock nut off, the stud rotates and the suppressor rotates and nothing comes loose. And then after several failed attempts of trying to hold it steady with the channel locks, I discovered that if I just get it in the same position that it was in and push down on it to hold it in place and then loosen it, it comes out. I'll explain. All right. I'm going to show you something once I get this off of here. I don't know if I blocked everything or not, but there is a trick to be had here. So this is a noise suppressor. You see how the back has got that big block in there? If you have trouble with all of it turning, this space right here, that block sits in that space, and if you put downward pressure on this so it can't move out of that space, you'll be able to get it off. Alright, and I hope you understand what I'm talking about. That notch, that block right there, helps hold it in that space so it doesn't rotate. So there's a tip. I hope that makes sense to you. But I think that when you start, if you have to do this job and you run across that, you will learn real quick what I'm talking about. So now we can get that last bolt out right here and wiggle this valve cover out of its place. I hope we got everything disconnected from it. Alright, here we go. We got fuel on it. Yep, we do. The fuel line. Yep, that's gonna be a motherfucker to get out of there. Holy shit. Look at that blow by in there. You got to see this, and you could probably see that puddle in the back corner there, and that's oil. That's a puddle of oil getting in there, which should not be there. Okay, back to the valve cover issue and that damn fuel line back there. That fitting right there that I'm touching is my fuel line, and that is right on the corner of the valve cover, and I cannot get a wrench, an AN wrench, on that. The other end of the fitting goes onto the rail deep down in there. I don't know if you can make that out or not, but anyway, I can't get in there with a wrench either. So the supercharger has to come off in order for me to get this valve cover off. I'm not going to go through that process on camera because you don't need to do that for yours unless, of course, you've got one of these 3.6s and you've got this kind of fuel system on your car. But that's out of the ordinary. And I'll be back when I got the supercharger off. I'm not too happy about it, but of course, it is what it is. When you buy race car parts, you got race car problems, right? Alright, as you can see, the supercharger's gone. There's where the blockage occurs with me trying to get it off, get the valve cover off. So now I can get this out of the way, valve cover will come right off, and then we can start on all the hoses and everything else. There's the 10 AN wrench, that fits just fine. Everything else is up out of the way. Let's go ahead and remove the valve cover. There we go, that should come off. This is not easy. Now what's keeping it? This is quickly becoming a nightmare. Okay, after wiggling and jiggling and pulling and cursing, coming out of there, I have discovered that this thing's not coming out of here until I get that brake booster out of the way, which means master cylinder, fuel regulator, and the booster has got to be removed. So I guess we should get inside, look under the dash, and see what it's going to take to disconnect the booster from the inside. So we're after that clip and pin that goes through there, and then there's one of the bolts right there. There's another one on that side and two on top. So those 4 bolts, or nuts actually, have to come out so we can pull the booster out after that. I think those are 13 millimeter. Got to have a deep well and a little bit of dexterity, and we're going to get to it right now. Okay, so this is the brake pedal pin that has to come out. Use 11 millimeter to press those tabs and then pry it out. Perfect. It went really smooth. So there's a good tip for you. Quick and easy steps, getting the regulator out. Couple of hose connections gone, couple of mounting bracket bolts gone, and that's that for the regulator. Yeah, there, done. Yeah, there we go. Pro tip, wait till you get it off before you try and get that connector off. Now we got to go on the inside and get under there. There's 4 bolts I got to take out and a pin from the brake. And one last thing we got to do here, always something, is the dipsticks tube got to come out of the way. 10 millimeters, and we're taking that bolt out now. Okay, this is for all the marbles. Let's see if we can't wiggle that sucker out of there. Got the booster wiggled out of the way. And out! Yay! Finally got it out. Got one of the seals fell down in there. There it is. So you can see, get a better shot of what we got to clear out of the way, and all of these pulleys, and get the belts off, get the hose assemblies and all of these tanks and everything out of the way up front here, so we got access to the front cover. This is what had to come off. The gold post hoses, the hose that connects to the bottom, and then you got the 2 mounting bolts. So that's already gone because I've already drained the coolant. So the drain plug is this right here, this guy, and I use this hose on there to guide it to where I wanted it to go. And this was to drain the intercooler. And that hose, this hose, is this hose right here. So we're going to disconnect this, disconnect that, and then pull this bucket out of the way with several hoses right along with it. Alright, so we're ready to take this out of here, so we're going to disconnect that, and disconnect this, so we can take this whole assembly out. And I think there's just a couple of bolts right there that we need to take out. That one right there, and that one right there. we go. We got it all. What we're going to do now that we got the thermostat housing out of the way is finish getting the hoses out, which means we're going to get this whole thing. It's kind of all kinds of hoses going in a lot of different directions. I think they nicknamed it the octopus. So we're going to take the octopus out. You have another connection over here that goes to the pipe bolted to the side of the engine, and down below here is where it connects to the lower radiator connection. And once all of these connections are taken off, as well as the hoses that go to the thermostat housing and the filler tank, you can then take this whole assembly called the octopus right on out of there and get the fan out of the way so we have a lot more area to work in. And in order to take the fan shroud out, you have a hose that connects right here. I'm going to disconnect that hose. And that goes all the way down to a hose I already showed you that connects to the intercooler radiator to drain the radiator down below. You'll see the other end of that hose in a moment. So you got a connection here, a bolt to take out here, a bolt to take out here, and a electrical connection right here. This is the guy here. And once you take all that out, the whole thing comes out with that hose completely attached to the shroud, just like that, and off to the side. And then we're going to take loosen the bolts here before we take the belt off. Then we're going to take the belt off. Then we're going to take the alternator off, and then pull off the pulleys that need to come off. I took off the belt tensioner that goes here for the supercharger belt. I've got to take this tensioner off here for the accessory belt. I had to take this pulley off in order to get access to the water pump. And that, I think, is the only pulleys I'll probably be taking off. At least that's what I think so far. And we'll make short work of this water pump real quick. Get it out of the way. There we go. Well, since I had a corrupt file for how to get the radiator and condenser out of the car, I thought I would just go over it with you. So these are the two mounting brackets, a couple of 10mm bolts. Pop these off, one on each side, to free up the radiator. These are the only two things really holding it down. Once you get that, you're going to find that the condenser is attached in these 4 locations. The assembly will look something like that. Once you take those 4 bolts out, you can separate the 2 units and pull the radiator out. Once you disconnect the connections to the condenser, then you can just take the condenser out as well. There's an argument to be had on whether or not you have to take the radiator and condenser out to take the front cover off. I opted to do it just so I could have a lot more room going through the opening that creates with the puller to get that front pulley off. My option. I'm just offering it up to you. It's going to be a lot easier with that gone than it is with it in place to manage the puller and the tools to use the puller. Alright, we got that on there. I think it's moved. Something moved. Yep, it's moving. It's coming off. Finally. Ta-da! It looks like whatever this is, I gotta take this off and to get this off, and I gotta take, looks like this off too, because there's a bolt going through the front cover right there. The trail deepens, it never ends. So this whole piece, this is the oil cooler right here. So all of that has to come off. This whole piece, that bolt, because this, see that? That's a front cover bolt right there. And the only way to get that off is to get this out of the way. So we got that. We got those two bolts. That little Torx head bolt that's attached to the steel water line. All of that's got to come off. Alright, so there's one more bolt to take out for that oil cooling assembly, and you can see it right down there, got the light on it. That is hidden right behind the oil cooler itself, that big block right there. And there's 6 bolts to take that off. There's 2 right there that you can see, but there's 3 on each side. All of those have to come off. Then I got to get the black water tube out of the way, bolt there, and 2 more. 1 more back by the oil filter, and 1 more on the engine block, so I can manipulate that out of the way and get the oil cooler assembly finally will come out, and that final bolt for the front cover will finally be accessible. I have just discovered that there's no way in hell I can get those 2 top bolts for the oil cooler on the opposite side. You can't see them from here, but without removing that engine mount bracket. So I'm going to have to take that bolt off, and then the 4 mounting bolts that hold that bracket to the block, that has to come out. So that's where I'm headed right now. I also found out I have to take steering coupler off too. I'll be back when I get that bracket off. Okay, the oil cooler is finally off. Here it is. This is what it looks like when it's off the engine. And there's 8 bolts to get it out. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. Alright, we're now going to see how much of this, how far we can go. I can see the front cover's separating as I take the bolts out. Okay, I just took out the 4 bolts on the oil pan. I disconnected the crankshaft position sensor, which is right down there. This is the moment of truth right here, boys. It's actually coming off. Well, that would be why I couldn't position my crankshaft, because that thing is spinning around all over the place. You can see that the key is broken. This is what it did to the trigger wheel. Look at that space. And you can tell by looking at the gear that the gear's cocked over, 2 teeth. The key's broken, the gear's broken, and we're out of time about 12 degrees. Mystery solved. This baby needs a crankshaft. Engine's coming out. So it's going to be a long ways before I get the engine back in and get this thing back on the road. But I solved the problem, and that's a win in anybody's book. So, hey, take a look at some burnouts from prior videos before all of this shit happened, and have a great time here at Doc's Boost. And I'll see you in that video in just a moment, and thanks for watching.